Let me be real with you. There's nothing more frustrating than giving your time, your energy, your heart to someone, only to feel like you're invisible to them. It stings, doesn't it? That ache in your chest, that voice in your head that says, "Why am I not enough?" I've been there, and it's one of the most disheartening experiences to go through. But let me tell you something I wish someone had told me back then. It's not about you lacking anything. The problem isn't who you are. It's how you're presenting yourself to the world and what you're allowing others to see. I had to learn this the hard way. There was a time when I bent over backward to make others happy. I thought if I just tried harder, if I was nicer, more accommodating, more giving, they'd finally notice me, value me, and treat me the way I deserved. But you know what happened instead? They kept taking me for granted. They knew I'd always be there, no matter how little effort they put in. And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. People don't value what they think they can have for free. That was the moment I decided to rewrite my story. I stopped chasing people who didn't see my worth. I stopped letting their opinions define my self-esteem. And most importantly, I stopped giving away pieces of myself to people who didn't deserve them. The change wasn't easy. It required me to dig deep, to confront parts of myself I'd been ignoring. But it was worth it. Slowly but surely, I noticed a shift. The very people who had dismissed me started paying attention. They leaned in closer, worked harder for my time, and yes, even became drawn to me in ways I never thought possible. What I learned is this: you can't force someone to value you, but you can inspire them to see your worth. And it starts with how you see yourself. Are you treating yourself with the respect you expect from others? Are you setting boundaries, prioritizing your growth, and showing the world that your time and energy are precious? When you start doing these things, everything changes. People who once overlooked you will take notice. Those who dismissed you will second-guess their actions. It's not magic. It's a mindset shift rooted in principles that have stood the test of time. I'm not here to give you false hope or tell you this journey will be easy, but I am here to tell you it's possible. When you take control of how you show up in the world, when you stop begging for respect and start commanding it, you'll see a transformation that will not only amaze you, but also inspire others. It's not about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't just attract attention, but demands admiration. You have that power. Let's unlock it together. Now that we've set the stage, let's dive deeper into one of the most powerful lessons I've learned. This one changed how I approach every relationship, every interaction, every single moment of connection. It's about understanding your worth and showing it, not by saying it, not by pleading for it, but by creating space for others to see it for themselves. Let me share something with you that completely shifted my mindset and transformed the way others treated me. I used to believe that being constantly available, always saying yes, always showing up the moment someone called, was the way to win people over. I thought that if I proved my loyalty and devotion enough, they'd appreciate me more. But the truth? It did the opposite. My constant availability made people take me for granted. They knew I'd always be there, so they stopped trying. My presence wasn't something they valued, it became something they expected. That realization was a hard pill to swallow, but it was also liberating. I started looking into what makes us value certain people, opportunities, or experiences, and the answer became clear: scarcity. When something is always available, it loses its appeal. But when it's rare, when it feels like you might not always have access to it, you pay attention, you cherish it. That's human nature, and the principle of scarcity taps right into it. And let me tell you, this isn't about playing games. It's about honoring your time, your energy, and yourself. When I started limiting my availability, something interesting happened. People who once brushed me off began to lean in. They reached out more often, put more effort into our interactions, and started valuing the time we spent together. It wasn't manipulation. It was me finally stepping into my worth. I wasn't withholding myself to punish anyone. I was creating space for myself to grow, and in doing so, I became someone people wanted to be around. This is where Stoic philosophy plays a huge role. The Stoics believed in focusing on what you can control, your actions, your time, your energy. They emphasized living intentionally, not reacting impulsively. By embracing this mindset, you start treating your time as a limited resource, something precious that you don't hand out to just anyone. And trust me, when you treat yourself with that level of respect, others will follow suit. Think about how often we give ourselves away without a second thought. We answer calls late at night, say yes to plans we don't want to attend, or respond to texts the moment they come in, all because we don't want to seem rude or uninterested. But what message does that send? It tells people that your time and energy are endless, that they can access you whenever they want. It's not about shutting people out. It's about showing them that your presence is meaningful and not to be taken lightly. When you start being deliberate with your time, you give people a reason to value it. If you're always available, there's no urgency to spend time with you. They assume you'll always be there. But if you prioritize your own needs, your goals, and your personal growth, you naturally create scarcity. And here's the thing. Scarcity doesn't mean being distant or cold. It means being intentional. It's about choosing when and where you show up and making those moments count. I've seen this work not just in relationships, but in every area of life. When you're always saying yes at work, people assume you'll handle everything, often without appreciation. But when you start saying no or setting boundaries, they realize your contributions are valuable and shouldn't be taken for granted. The same applies to friendships, family, and even romantic connections. When you protect your energy, you teach others to respect it. One of the most powerful ways to apply this principle is by being mindful of how you respond to others. For example, if someone texts you and you respond immediately every time, they may start expecting instant replies. But if you take your time, responding when it's convenient for you rather than rushing, you subtly communicate that your attention isn't something they can demand. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about breaking the habit of prioritizing others over yourself. Another aspect of scarcity is creating meaningful interactions. If you're spending time with someone, make it count. Be fully present, engage in deep conversations, and create moments that resonate. When your presence leaves an impact, people will value it more. It's not about how often you're around. It's about the quality of the connection you offer. Scarcity paired with intention creates undeniable value. Scarcity also gives you time to focus on yourself. The time you're not spending trying to please everyone else can be spent building yourself up. Maybe it's picking up a new skill, working on a passion project, or simply taking a moment to rest. When you invest in yourself, you become a better, more confident version of who you are. That confidence is magnetic. It draws people in because it shows you're not dependent on them for your happiness. You're whole on your own. I can't stress this enough. Scarcity is about empowerment, not manipulation. It's about showing others and yourself that you're worth the effort. People will naturally put more energy into someone they feel they could lose. But here's the twist. When you create scarcity, it's not about them chasing you. It's about you creating a life so rich and fulfilling that they can't help but want to be part of it. This approach has completely transformed how I interact with others. I no longer feel the need to prove myself or overextend to gain approval. I've learned that by valuing myself, I inspire others to do the same. It's a process, and it requires unlearning habits of overgiving and people-pleasing. But once you step into this mindset, there's no going back. You start attracting people who respect you, value you, and genuinely want to be around you. Not because you're always available, but because you've shown them that your presence is worth something. So, if you've ever felt like you're giving too much and getting too little in return, it's time to shift the narrative. Focus on yourself, guard your energy, and let others see the value in what you offer. When you stop chasing and start living intentionally, you don't just become desirable, you become unforgettable. When you understand the power of scarcity and start valuing your time, you create a shift in how others perceive you. But that's only one part of the puzzle. The next step is learning to stand on your own 2 feet emotionally. Let me tell you, this is where everything changes. When you stop relying on others to validate you, fulfill you, or determine your happiness, you become untouchable. It's not about shutting people out or pretending you don't care. It's about building an inner strength so solid that no external force can shake it. This lesson hit me hard during a time in my life when I felt completely dependent on what others thought of me. A single criticism could ruin my day. If someone didn't reply to a text or seemed distant, my mind would spiral into overthinking. I lived on an emotional roller coaster, my mood dictated by how others treated me. It was exhausting, and honestly, it was unsustainable. One day, I realized something. The person who held the most power over my emotions wasn't them. It was me. I was giving them that power, handing it over without even realizing it. That realization was the beginning of my journey toward emotional independence. The Stoics teach us that the only thing we truly control is ourselves, our thoughts, our actions, our emotions. Everything else, it's outside of our control. This idea was liberating for me. It meant I didn't have to let someone else's bad mood, careless words, or neglect determine how I felt about myself. I could choose to detach from their opinions and focus on my own. This wasn't about becoming indifferent or cold. It was about taking back the reins of my emotional life. One of the first steps I took was learning to separate my worth from how others treated me. For so long, I had let external validation define my self-esteem. If someone praised me, I felt good. If they criticized me, I felt worthless. But here's the truth. Your worth isn't something others get to decide. It's inherent, unshakable, and entirely yours to claim. Once I stopped chasing approval and started affirming my own value, a strange thing happened. I felt lighter, freer, and more confident. And here's the kicker. People started respecting me more. When you stop seeking validation, you exude a quiet confidence that draws others in. Emotional independence also means learning to find fulfillment within yourself. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking someone else will complete you, that a relationship, a friendship, or even a job will fill the gaps in your happiness. But that's a dangerous game. When you rely on external sources for fulfillment, you give them the power to take it away. I learned to cultivate joy in the things I could control, my hobbies, my growth, my connection to myself. This wasn't about shutting others out. It was about making sure I wasn't dependent on them for my happiness. Another important aspect of emotional independence is mastering your reactions. Let me ask you this. How often do you let someone else's behavior dictate your mood? Maybe a rude comment ruins your day, or someone's lack of attention makes you feel invisible. I've been there too. But here's what I've learned. When you react emotionally, you give them power over you. The Stoics teach us to pause, reflect, and respond with intention instead of letting emotions take over. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about channeling them in a way that serves you, not controls you. One practice that helped me immensely was journaling. Every time I felt triggered or overwhelmed, I'd write it down. I'd ask myself, why does this bother me? Is it something I can control? What would happen if I let this go? Over time, I noticed patterns in my emotional reactions. I realized that many of the things I was upset about had nothing to do with the present moment. They were tied to fears, insecurities, or expectations I was holding on to. Letting go of those made room for peace. Building emotional independence also means embracing solitude. Now, this can be uncomfortable at first. We're so used to filling every moment with distractions, social media, conversations, endless busyness, that the thought of being alone with our thoughts can feel daunting. But solitude is where you get to know yourself. It's where you build a relationship with the person you spend every moment with, you. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you stop fearing the absence of others. You realize that being alone doesn't mean being lonely, it means being whole. One of the most powerful shifts for me was learning to let go of the need to control how others see me. I used to obsess over whether people liked me, whether I was doing enough to please them, whether I was meeting their expectations. But the Stoics teach us that we can't control others' opinions, only our actions and intentions. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overextending yourself for approval that isn't guaranteed. Instead, you focus on living in alignment with your values, knowing that those who truly matter will see your worth. Emotional independence is also about resilience. Life is unpredictable. People will let you down, plans will fall apart, and not everything will go your way. But when you build inner strength, you can weather those storms without losing your sense of self. For me, this meant learning to embrace discomfort instead of running from it. The Stoics believed that adversity is an opportunity to grow, and I found that to be true. Every challenge I faced taught me something about myself, what I value, what I'm capable of, and what truly matters. Detachment is another key element. Now, detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means not clinging to things outside your control. It's about loving without possessing, caring without obsessing, and engaging without depending. When you detach from the need for others' approval or attention, you create space for genuine connection. You're not trying to force a relationship or prove your worth. You're simply showing up as your authentic self, and that authenticity is magnetic. Mastering emotional independence is a journey, not a destination. It requires constant self-awareness, intentional choices, and a commitment to growth. But the rewards are immeasurable. When you no longer rely on others to define your happiness, you become free. Free to live on your own terms, free to give without expectation, and free to walk away from anything that doesn't serve you. That freedom is powerful, and it's what makes you truly irresistible. As you grow stronger emotionally, something becomes crystal clear. The way others treat you often reflects the standards you set for yourself. When you start valuing your inner peace and emotional independence, you naturally begin to notice where your energy is being drained. It's in those moments that boundaries come into play. If emotional independence is the foundation of your inner strength, boundaries are the walls that protect it. They're not just lines you draw to keep others out. They're the structure that defines how you allow others to engage with you. Without them, even the strongest emotional independence can crumble under the weight of other people's expectations, demands, or disrespect. I've learned this through some of my toughest experiences. There was a time when I said yes to everything and everyone because I thought it was the polite thing to do. I didn't want to offend anyone or come across as difficult, so I bent over backward to meet their needs, even at the expense of my own. But here's the truth I had to face. Every time I said yes to something I didn't want, I was saying no to myself. No to my peace, no to my goals, no to my self-respect. And the worst part, the more I allowed others to overstep, the more they took my compliance for granted. It wasn't until I started saying no that I realized how powerful boundaries could be. Setting boundaries isn't about being mean or shutting people out. It's about showing respect for yourself and teaching others to do the same. People often confuse kindness with endless availability, but kindness doesn't mean allowing yourself to be drained. In fact, the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to be clear about your limits. When you're honest about what you can and cannot do, you create relationships built on mutual respect, not silent resentment. One of the most transformative lessons I've learned about boundaries is that they're not just for others, they're for you. Boundaries help you identify what you truly value and prioritize. For example, I started by asking myself some tough questions. What are the things that matter most to me? What behaviors drain my energy or make me feel disrespected? Once I was clear on those answers, I began to set boundaries that aligned with my values. It wasn't easy at first. Saying no felt uncomfortable, even scary. But with each no, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. Boundaries aren't just about saying no. They're about redefining how you show up in relationships. I've noticed that when you set clear limits, people begin to respect your time and energy more. It's not because you're forcing them to, it's because you're showing them how much you value yourself. When you respect yourself, others follow suit. This shift is profound. Suddenly, you're no longer the person who's always available to clean up someone else's mess or drop everything at the last minute. You're someone who values their time and expects others to do the same. One of the most challenging parts of setting boundaries is dealing with pushback. Let's be honest, not everyone will be thrilled when you start saying no. Some people will test your limits, guilt-trip you, or accuse you of being selfish. I've experienced all of this, and it's uncomfortable. But here's what I've learned. Their reaction is not your responsibility. Boundaries are about protecting your well-being, not managing someone else's feelings. If someone truly values you, they'll respect your limits, even if it takes them some time to adjust. If they don't, that's a reflection of their character, not your worth. One of the most powerful boundary-setting tools I've discovered is clarity. Ambiguity is the enemy of effective boundaries. When you're vague about your limits, people will push them without even realizing it. For example, instead of saying, "I don't like it when you call me late at night," try saying, "I'm unavailable for calls after 9 p.m. unless it's an emergency." This kind of specificity leaves no room for misinterpretation. It's clear, firm, and respectful. And the best part, it makes enforcing the boundary much easier because you've already laid the groundwork. Another important aspect of boundary setting is consistency. I used to struggle with this. I'd set a boundary, but the moment someone pushed against it, I'd cave. I thought I was being flexible or accommodating, but in reality, I was sending mixed signals. People didn't take my boundaries seriously because I wasn't taking them seriously. Once I committed to consistency, holding firm even when it was uncomfortable, I noticed a dramatic shift. People began to respect my boundaries because they knew I meant what I said. Boundaries also help you create deeper, healthier connections. It might sound counterintuitive, but by setting limits, you actually make room for more meaningful relationships. When you're clear about your needs and expectations, you attract people who align with your values and respect your boundaries. At the same time, you filter out those who aren't willing to meet you halfway. This creates space for authentic, reciprocal relationships that nourish rather than drain you. One of the most freeing realizations I've had about boundaries is that they're fluid. They can evolve as you grow and change. What worked for you a year ago might not work now, and that's okay. For example, there was a time when I needed strict boundaries around my work-life balance because I was burning out. But as I found more balance, I was able to adjust those limits without sacrificing my well-being. Boundaries aren't rigid rules. They're living guidelines that help you navigate your relationships and your life. When you start setting boundaries, you might feel guilty at first. That's normal. Society often teaches us that saying no is selfish, especially if you're someone who's used to putting others first. But here's the truth. Saying no isn't selfish. It's self-care. It's recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's taking responsibility for your own well-being. Over time, as you see the positive impact of your boundaries, that guilt will fade, replaced by a sense of empowerment and peace. Boundaries are a powerful expression of self-respect. They show the world that you value your time, your energy, and your peace. And when you value yourself, you set a standard for how others should treat you. It's not about building walls. It's about creating a space where you can thrive and inviting others to meet you there. When you live this way, you don't just gain respect, you inspire it. When you set clear boundaries, something incredible happens. You begin to see who truly respects and values you. But what about those moments when someone doesn't? Rejection, neglect, or being overlooked can feel like a blow to your self-worth. It's one of the most painful experiences, leaving you questioning yourself, your choices, and even your value. I've been there too, and I know how easy it is to let rejection pull you into a spiral of doubt and overthinking. But here's the truth. Rejection isn't the end. It's an invitation to grow, to rise, and to become stronger. What feels like a door slamming shut can actually be the beginning of something extraordinary. I remember a time when rejection hit me hard. It wasn't just a passing moment. It stayed with me, echoing in my mind like a reminder of what I thought I lacked. But then I stumbled upon a perspective that changed everything. Instead of seeing rejection as a reflection of my worth, I started viewing it as feedback. What could I learn from this? How could I use it to improve myself, not for them, but for me? This shift didn't just help me heal, it helped me thrive. Rejection is one of life's harshest teachers, but it's also one of the most valuable. The Stoics believed that we can't control how others treat us, but we can always control our response. Rejection gives us an opportunity to reflect and grow. Instead of focusing on what you've lost, you can focus on what you can gain from the experience. For me, this meant diving deep into self-improvement. I started asking myself, how can I become better, stronger, and more resilient? This wasn't about trying to win anyone back. It was about becoming someone who didn't need external validation to feel whole. One of the first things I learned is that rejection often has little to do with you and everything to do with the other person's perspective, priorities, or limitations. People reject based on their own insecurities, biases, or circumstances. Once I internalized this, I stopped taking rejection so personally. I realized that their inability to see my value didn't diminish it. It simply meant they weren't the right fit for my journey. Instead of letting rejection make me feel small, I used it as fuel to grow. I worked on my skills, my confidence, and my ability to handle life's challenges. Every time I faced rejection, I asked myself what I could improve. Not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove to myself that I was capable of more. This approach turned rejection into a tool for self-reflection and growth. And with every lesson I learned, I became more confident in my own value. Confidence is one of the most powerful antidotes to rejection. When you carry yourself with self-assurance, it makes others rethink their initial indifference. I've experienced this firsthand. When I stopped dwelling on what I lacked and started focusing on what I had to offer, people's perceptions of me shifted. Confidence isn't about arrogance. It's about owning your worth without needing anyone else to validate it. And here's the beautiful thing. When you project confidence, it often makes people realize what they overlooked in you. Resilience is another key lesson rejection taught me. Life is full of setbacks, and the ability to bounce back from them is what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Every rejection I faced became a stepping stone to something greater. I started seeing rejection as redirection, a way the universe was guiding me toward opportunities and people who truly aligned with my values. This mindset shift helped me let go of the pain of rejection and focus on the possibilities ahead. Another important lesson was learning to embrace failure as part of the process. Rejection is often accompanied by feelings of failure, but the Stoics teach us that failure is a natural and necessary part of growth. It's not something to fear or avoid, it's something to learn from. I began to see failure and rejection as proof that I was trying, that I was putting myself out there. And every time I failed, I gained new insights and grew stronger. Rejection also taught me the value of patience. Sometimes people don't see your worth immediately, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I've had instances where people who once dismissed me came back later, realizing what they had overlooked. This doesn't happen because you beg for their attention. It happens because you focused on building yourself in the meantime. When you stop chasing and start growing, you become someone worth noticing, and often that speaks louder than anything you could say. Neglect and rejection can also help you refine what truly matters to you. Sometimes being rejected is a blessing in disguise. It frees you from situations or people who weren't right for you. It forces you to reevaluate your goals, your relationships, and your path. I've found that every rejection I've faced has ultimately led me to something better, even if I couldn't see it at the time. It's like clearing space in your life for something greater to enter. Rejection also deepens your empathy and understanding. When you've experienced neglect or indifference, you become more attuned to the feelings of others. This doesn't mean you let people walk over you, but it gives you a greater sense of compassion and resilience. You begin to understand that everyone faces rejection in some form, and this shared experience can connect you to others in a meaningful way. One of the most empowering realizations I've had is that rejection doesn't define you, it reveals you. It shows you your strengths, your resilience, and your capacity to grow. Every time someone overlooked me or dismissed my value, I used it as an opportunity to rise higher. And each time I did, I became more grounded in who I was. Rejection stopped being something to fear and started being something to embrace, a sign that I was moving forward, taking risks and evolving. The way you handle rejection says more about you than the rejection itself. When you choose to use it as a platform for growth, you transform it from something that holds you back into something that propels you forward. You show yourself and the world that your value isn't dependent on anyone else's opinion. It's something you carry within you, unshakable and undeniable. That's a power no rejection can ever take away. Rejection teaches us resilience, patience, and the power of growth. But there's another lesson that pairs perfectly with it: knowing when to say less and let your actions take center stage. One of the most powerful tools I've discovered in transforming how people perceive me isn't loud declarations or constant explanations. It's silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear or avoidance, but an intentional silence that commands attention and creates space for people to truly see your value. Silence has a way of making people curious. It creates a pause, a space for reflection, and in that space, people start to pay closer attention. I used to think I needed to fill every gap with words, to explain myself, defend my choices, or prove my worth. But all that noise often diluted my message. What I've learned is that silence, when used intentionally, can say more than any words ever could. There's a certain strength in not feeling the need to explain yourself all the time. When you stop over-explaining or seeking approval through your words, You show people that you're confident in who you are. This was a hard lesson for me because I used to overcompensate with explanations. If someone didn't understand my intentions, I'd go out of my way to clarify, sometimes to the point of exhausting myself. But what I didn't realize was that in trying so hard to make them understand, I was giving away my power. By staying silent and letting my actions speak, I began to command more respect. Silence also creates a sense of intrigue. When you don't reveal everything about yourself immediately, people naturally become more curious. They want to know more, to understand what's behind the quiet confidence. I've seen this work in my personal and professional life. The less I tried to force people to notice me, the more they leaned in. Silence isn't about withholding who you are. It's about letting others come to their own realizations about your value. One of the most practical ways I've applied this is in conversations. Instead of rushing to fill every pause, I let the silence linger. At first, it felt awkward, but then I noticed something remarkable. People started opening up more, sharing their thoughts, and valuing the time we spent together. Silence creates space for others to feel heard, and in doing so, it makes your presence feel more significant. Silence is also a tool for composure. There have been moments when I've faced criticism or confrontation, and my initial instinct was to react, to defend myself. But reacting emotionally often gives away your power. When I learned to stay silent in those moments, something shifted. The silence disarmed the other person. It showed that I wasn't easily rattled, that I had control over my emotions. This kind of restraint not only protects your peace, but also earns you admiration. Stoic philosophy emphasizes the importance of self-discipline, and silence is one of the purest expressions of that. It takes discipline to hold back when you want to speak, especially when emotions are high. But that restraint speaks volumes about your character. It shows that you're not controlled by impulses or the need for external validation. When you can maintain your composure and let your silence carry your message, you demonstrate a level of strength that's hard to ignore. Silence doesn't mean passivity. It means intention. It means choosing when to speak and when to let your actions speak for you. I've found that some of the most impactful moments in my life didn't come from what I said, but from what I did. Whether it was showing up consistently, delivering results, or simply being there when it mattered, my actions left an impression that words never could. People may forget what you say, but they'll remember what you do. Silence also teaches you to listen. When you're not focused on what you're going to say next, you become more present. You start to pick up on things you might have missed, the tone of someone's voice, the emotions behind their words, or the subtleties of a situation. This kind of awareness makes you more attuned to the people around you, which in turn deepens your connections and makes you more effective in how you respond. One of the most profound lessons I've learned about silence is that it creates boundaries without confrontation. When you choose not to engage in certain conversations or react to provocation, you're silently communicating your standards. It's a way of saying, "This isn't worth my energy," without uttering a single word. And here's the thing, people notice. They notice when you don't rise to their bait, when you don't feel the need to justify yourself, and that quiet confidence often makes them respect you more. There's also a strategic element to silence. In negotiations, for example, silence can be incredibly powerful. When you state your case and then stop talking, you put the ball in the other person's court. They're left to process what you've said without being distracted by additional words. This approach applies to so many areas of life, from relationships to business. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is say less and let the weight of your actions carry the conversation. Silence, when paired with consistent action, creates a foundation of trust and reliability. People may question your words, but they can't argue with your actions. When you follow through on your commitments, stay true to your values, and let your work speak for itself, you build a reputation that silence only enhances. It's a quiet kind of power, but it's incredibly effective. This isn't about staying silent all the time or withholding your thoughts. It's about knowing when to step back and let your presence speak louder than your words. It's about recognizing that you don't have to shout to be heard. Silence, when used intentionally, can be one of the most powerful tools in your personal and professional relationships. It creates space for others to see your value, to reflect on your impact, and to appreciate what you bring to the table. The next time you're faced with a situation where you feel the urge to speak up, pause. Ask yourself, does this need words, or will my actions say more? You might be surprised at how much power there is in restraint, in letting the silence do the talking. That's the kind of presence that leaves an impression long after the moment has passed. Let me leave you with this. The journey to being truly valued and admired doesn't begin with changing others. It starts with transforming how you see yourself. When you embrace scarcity and guard your time, when you master emotional independence and radiate confidence, when you set boundaries that demand respect, and when you let your actions speak louder than your words, you don't just inspire admiration. You ignite a sense of intrigue and obsession in those who once overlooked you. This isn't about playing games or seeking revenge. It's about becoming so centered, so grounded in your worth, that people have no choice but to see your value. I know this path isn't always easy, but trust me, it's worth it. Each step you take towards self-respect, resilience, and intentional living creates a ripple effect. Not only do you elevate how others perceive you, but you also transform your own life into something richer, stronger, and more fulfilling. Now I want to hear from you. What part of this journey resonated with you the most? Was it the idea of setting boundaries, mastering emotional independence, or perhaps the power of silence? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective and connect with you. And if you found value in this, don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button and join our community where we dive deep into topics that help you take control of your life and unlock your full potential. Let's keep growing together. Thank you for being here with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong and stay true to yourself.